Hello everyone, hope everyone's doing well out there, as always. Okay, so to address the elephant in the room, yes, I have round glasses and dark hair. Everybody knows round glasses plus dark hair equals Harry Potter. Doesn't matter if you look nothing like him in any other way. I'm American and I'm nothing like him. I'm not an orphan. My dad's a lovely guy. I wear the glasses because when I was a teenager, I thought hippies were cool instead of just smelly burnouts. And so I started dressing like this, and then people started complimenting the glasses, and I keep them, even though every now and then someone says I look like Harry Potter. I deal with it. Okay, up front, yes, this is a video that is criticizing the acting of the various actors in these beloved movies, but it's also addressing a common meme that I see in the fandom, where people like to blame the writers entirely for the failure of Ginny's character arc, or the way that they felt that Ron didn't have his proper personality. They felt like he was this wimpy version of the character. And everyone just wants to blame the writers for this. For anybody who's not familiar with what I'm talking about, I'd recommend watching Movie Flame's video, The Harry Potter Films Making Hermione Perfect and Ron Suck for 15 minutes, and his more recent video, Bonnie Wright Wants Justice for Ginny Weasley in the rebooted Harry Potter series, Sad Situation. That second video sort of being the reason that I made this video in the first place. I want to stress, I really like Movie Flame. I like him as a creator. I think he seems like a really cool and nice guy. I just very much disagree with him when it comes to this specific take, and I'm going to try and explain why. But yeah, I'm coming at this all from the point of view of somebody who, I look back on the series with a lot of nostalgia and reverence, but also a bit demystified. It's definitely not a perfect series, but I think it's great. I think there's a reason that it is so popular across the world, that it is such a appealing story. This story isn't my total obsession or anything. It's not. I would never make a channel entirely dedicated to this one story, because I see this a lot on the internet. I troll all of the fan whatever channels. I've seen Movie Flame and Super Carlin Brothers and stuff like that. But so yeah, on those kinds of channels, the common narrative is that the writers ruined Ginny. They just didn't write her with any interesting scenes. There were so many cool things that she did in the book that she didn't do in the movies, and I agree with everybody about this criticism. So whose fault could it be besides the writers, right? The writers, why didn't they just write those scenes into it? I mean, these are professional writers. They dedicate their entire life to writing, right? All of us fans who like to talk about this stuff, sure, we can in retrospect look at it and say, this is what you should have done, this is what made more sense, why didn't you just do this, why didn't you make it this way? But oftentimes I feel like people really just don't think about the position of the person making the thing that they're criticizing. Case in point is Hollywood writers. The Hollywood writer is writing under the constraints of the production. They can only write things that can be physically achievable. And really what I'm getting at is that writers, if they know the actor that they're writing for, they could be writing for the actor's abilities. You're a writer and you know that you're going to have to work with this one actor, and you have a really great idea for a scene that's super tragic and comes to this big climax, but you know that the actor is just not capable of crying on command, or crying convincingly at a level that wouldn't be cheesy or wouldn't seem ridiculous to people. If you're a good writer and you want to be nice to this actor, you don't write that scene into the script, even though you love the scene. It would be a really great idea because you don't want to see the actor make a big fool of themselves. But yeah, everybody knows that the movies got Ron wrong, that they didn't portray the personality that was in the books the same in the film. But nobody ever stops to think that maybe the reason that these character traits weren't in the films and weren't being portrayed by the actor is in part because the writers knew that the actor wasn't capable of doing these things convincingly. The classic example that everybody loves to give when talking about this is from the third book and in the third movie, where Ron gets dragged into the Shrieking Shack. In the book, Ron has the line about, if you want Harry, you're going to have to kill us too. Shows his personality, shows the kind of character he is. And in the movie, they gave that line to Hermione. And I understand why people don't like this change and why they see it as just another example of the writers preferring Hermione and not liking Ron as a character. The common theory that people spread around is that the writer Steve Kloves just preferred Hermione as a character and disliked Ron as a character, and that's why there was this change. That's why they didn't include all these different things. And I do think that there is some merit to that idea. I mean, Steve Kloves did express that Hermione was his favorite character. He thought of her as a useful character, as a tool for explaining exposition, because she's read every book, and so anything that you need explained, you can just assume that she read it in a book and she can just tell the audience. Which, I mean, yeah, fair enough. From like a writer's point of view, that is useful. That makes perfect sense to me. I don't think that that would necessarily be enough of a reason for a professional writer to just decide not to make one of the three main characters their core personality. But let's go back to that line. I think the reason, or at least in part the reason, that he would have given that line to Hermione instead of Ron isn't even about character. It's because he knows the actors he's working with. Probably thought to himself, between the two actors, I feel like Emma would be the one that would be able to give the stronger, more gritty, whatever response. Which takes me to the real point of this video. I think that the writers flubbed these two characters, Ginny and Ron, in large part because the actors portraying them were just not capable of giving performances to match the personalities that they were supposed to have. I'm not saying that that's entirely the reason. It could be, you know, in part that the writers just didn't like the character as much, and it could be that they just didn't think of Ginny as more than Harry's romance or whatever, sort of reducing her character to that. I definitely think that could have played a role in it. But like, there's this meme that sort of goes around the fandom, and I think it's partly, I don't want to say ass kissing, but it's like fans wanting to be nice to the stars in the movies, or trying to be generous, or the fans are very charitable in their interpretation of these events in favor of the stars that they like. So it's like really popular to say, oh, you know, Bonnie Wright, she's great. It's not her fault. It's the writers ruined her character, and poor Bonnie Wright didn't get the opportunity to play this character as she really could have, and she would have done a great job if they had written her better. That is the sentiment that I feel like is the main thing that people say right now, but I just feel like that's not true. She's actually really not a good actress in these movies, and this is where I'm going to sound like a big jerk, but I would just like to point out that Bonnie Wright is a beautiful, probably rich, very successful person who is in one of the most successful movie franchises of all time, and I'm sure she's doing just fine, and I'm sure she's a lovely person. And I don't know, I don't feel as uncomfortable criticizing her performance given her recent statements about the writers and sort of saying that it was their fault that the character wasn't as well received as she wanted or as people wanted.
There's just no room for much change in those scripts.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's like there was a million executives. I kind of felt that like, oh, I'm going to be seen as like badly portraying this character, rather than later realizing, well, I wasn't really given the opportunity to do that. So it wasn't really my, you know, fault.
Again, I think there's some merit to that, and I can understand why she would be protective of her own ego in regards to her own performance. She doesn't want to say, I gave a terrible performance and that's why people don't like the character. Nobody wants to say that. I totally understand that. And it's not like we haven't seen actors complaining about writers in other things before. Like, everybody likes when the Game of Thrones actors were crapping all over season 8 of Game of Thrones. Because, yeah, the writing was just really terrible. It was clear that they didn't know what they were doing, and they made a terrible finale for the show. And the cast just had opinions on the writing and how bad it was. And I think that's fair. And I think it's fair for Bonnie to have her own opinions about how the writing of Ginny was handled in the movies. But, I mean, it's interesting that she doesn't really seem to acknowledge her own role in failing to realize the potential of the character. Like, Bonnie Wright had a lot of screen time as Ginny in these movies. Movie Flame actually has a video where he shows that she actually proportionally got more screen time in the movies than the book character got in the books. I think she had a lot more opportunity to show the personality that she's saying she wished was portrayed with the material that they gave her. But I'll get into that later on. For now, the way I see it, if she's comfortable sharing her opinions as to why she thinks this went wrong, then I'm going to be comfortable sharing my opinion as to why I thought it went wrong. Sure, she was not given great material to work with, but like just watch the scenes that she's in. Like, think of every scene that Bonnie Wright is in the Harry Potter movies. She is doing the exact same thing in every single scene. Her face is basically the same, except maybe she widens her eyes when she sees Harry. She could have acted like a person with a big personality, right? Like, maybe even the director tried to pull that out of her, but she was just not an experienced actress and was reserved. Or, you know, I don't know what the set was like, okay? So I don't know. Maybe the director did say, hey, keep your face the exact same every time and be super stiff with your body always. Look at Bonnie Wright's body language in every scene that she acts in. Stiff, completely stiff in everything. Even like, you know, there's like the scene where Harry is like, she thinks he's dead and she runs out and goes, no, and kind of bends down. It's all so stiff. Or like the romance scene where she's tying his shoe, she is stiff and then goes down and is stiff, and then he gets up and they're stiff. And it's also stiff and awkward. And it's like, part of the reason that scene is so stilted and awkward is because they don't have any physical chemistry to be playing off of each other in the scene with. And that's not even really to mention the fact that she just kind of has a basic believability problem when it comes to delivering dialogue. Like, can anybody honestly watch these line reads and tell me that they come off as genuine?
I was only wondering when Harry got here. Harry Potter, of course. But his trunk's in the kitchen, and his owl.
He's covered in blood again. Why is it always covered in blood?
Open up, you.
Don't you trust me?
Has Ron gone to bed? Shoelace.
We need to hide the Half-Blood Prince's book, where no one will ever find it, including you.
You never know what you'll find up here.
I can stay hidden up here too if you like. Take my hand.
And these are the final takes they settled on for the movie, meaning that every other take that the editor looked at for this shot was hokier or faker sounding than this. This is the best take that they could get out of this actress for this movie. Granted, this is not the strongest material in the world for an actor to be given, but I just don't think that Bonnie even half realizes the potential that the material actually offers her. Like this scene, for example. So the context of this scene is the love of her life, the future father of her children, who she's been in love with since she was a little girl. A guy who she understands incredibly intimately. She has spent months of time with him. She has also been possessed by Voldemort, just like he has. She has been through the same kinds of struggles that he has. She understands him on this very deep level. And he has shown up unannounced at her house. Does any of that information read in her reaction at all? The way that she reacts when she sees his things, the way she's talking about him when she's talking to her mom, does any of that come off as a person who just found out that the love of their life just showed up at their house out of nowhere? It doesn't feel that way at all. But that's what the material actually offered her. She had the chance to portray that, but all of that context, all of that subtext is missing from her performance. She just gives it nothing. Or this line delivery.
He's covered in blood again. Why is it always covered in blood?
Looks like it's his own this time.
In the right performer's hands, this would have been a big laugh line. And I feel like the intention of the line, as written, is pretty clear. She should sound exasperated, like comically exasperated. The point of the line is the familiarity, right? Like, she's so used to seeing him face all these kinds of things. It's like just another day with him. Why is he always covered in blood? There's an irony to it. It's even maybe a bit of a sarcasm in the way that you would want to deliver that line. It had the opportunity to show a sort of wry sense of humor, sarcasm, a wit, some of that personality that everybody says that they wanted from Ginny in the movies. This line was an opportunity to sort of show that side of the character, and she just delivered it with this deadpan, dead on arrival performance. And it comes off as awkward, but I think with a better actress, I don't think that line would have come off as awkward or had to come off as awkward. I think it could have been funny and even endearing. Or even this scene, again, this is sort of a weak setup. It's not an easy thing to ask an actor to sort of play feed another person flirtatiously, especially if you're trying to keep it that we're still pretending to be friends. It is a little bit of a tough ask to make that seem casual and natural and flirtatious, but in a good actress's hands, it could be done. She should be almost joking with the way that she's offering to feed him, not like serious and sort of like quietly desperate or like expectant. There's no humor between them. There's no life in this conversation. She's not doing it for fun. Like the motivation should just be for fun because she thinks it's funny or she thinks he would like it or something like that. It just doesn't read that way at all. It just feels forced, completely forced. Can you really say that this is the best way to portray this dialogue and this situation, is the way that she handled it? You don't think that she could have had more personality? She could have seemed more interested in Harry, felt more familiar with him, comfortable with him? Like, shouldn't she be really familiar with him? Like, he's in her house all the time. He's a familiar presence. If she sees him at school, and then when she comes home during the summer, he's also there sometimes. So she's really used to seeing him in it. And the whole story of their relationship up until this point is about her becoming comfortable with him being around. Like, that's supposed to be the difference between the beginning and end of their relationship, is that she no longer is this like stilted, uncomfortable, can't be casual and herself around him, but there's just nothing casual about this. There's nothing organic about it, and it has a lot to do with the stiffness of her performance, the stiffness of her delivery of these lines. Again, not the greatest lines ever, but you could have done something with it. The shoelace scene, I'm not gonna defend. Okay, like, you can't, not all of them are good. And this one's, yeah, it's just not good. I don't think it would have really worked in anything. I think it would have come off as goofy and anything. I think the only way you could really make it work is to play it off as a joke. Everything about it is just wrong. I just wouldn't have done this scene entirely, but I do think this is the worst version of it. Like, it could have been done better, but even done well, I don't think this scene would have been very good. And then this scene is an interesting one because it's a movie invention. The book never really had Ginny doing this for Harry. Again, it just doesn't have any good chemistry. Ginny's face is totally stiff and stilted. Her body is stiff and stilted. She doesn't look like a person who's finally gotten in a relationship with the person she's been in love with for her whole life. There's just no real romantic connection between the two of them. It doesn't feel like they're even familiar. They feel like strangers. She should be comfortable, and so should he, and instead it's the exact opposite. It's a total vacuum. And a lot of that has to do with the acting. I think it mostly has to do with the acting. I think you could have delivered this scene where these same lines were said and it felt completely different because of the performance. Because, a lot of acting is subtext, and not every actor is talented enough to pick up on subtext or be able to portray the subtext in a given scene successfully. Some actors don't even think that deeply about their characters in general and don't really get to the heart of what their actual motivations are. But if we're all supposed to be saying that this actress did everything she could and she was great and she would have killed it with better writing, I just feel like that's not true. There's even this one scene where they literally have to have Hermione spell out to the audience what Ginny is feeling. During Slughorn's party, when she comes in after crying, Hermione has to say, "She's crying, she's been fighting with Dean again." And it just doesn't look that way. I mean, I understand why they had to put that line in there. It would have been unclear if they didn't say something. And this is a perfect example of a time where I feel like people would be criticizing the writers and saying something like, you don't need to have that line, like, show, don't tell, like, just have Ginny give a performance and let that be the way that we figure it out. But it's possible that this was their clumsy solution to Ginny's performance not being quite up to snuff. I don't know. I feel like the fan base is blinded by their love of the character and their nostalgia for the series and their respect for the actors. I mean, like, I have no disrespect for Bonnie Wright. I don't think there's anything wrong with not being an actor at the caliber to compete with all of these legends that are on screen with you, especially when you were plucked out of obscurity as a little kid and made to act in these movies where for the first 4 movies she really just didn't have anything to do, and she fit fine for her role in the movies. Like, when they first cast her for the very first movie, she didn't really have to do anything. She was barely in it at all. She was in it at the very beginning, and it was fine for that. Because that's the other thing, is that people are understandably uncomfortable in criticizing a child actor's performance because, you know, it's not a child's fault. It's hard to speak critically about a child's performance because they put their all into it and they're just a kid. They're all grown up at this point. And honestly, it's not even super applicable for me because I think Bonnie Wright actually gets worse as the movies go on. Her line deliveries get worse. Her acting gets more stiff. Her body language more stiff the further the movies go on. Once you start to see that, it begins to make sense, the idea that a lot of the writing changes that happened with Ginny were probably because the writers understood that Bonnie Wright was going to be Ginny and wasn't going to be able to do a lot of this stuff. If they had written the character the way that it was done in the books, could this actress have pulled that performance off? I personally don't think so. The point of all of this is that there is a denial on the fandom's part of the actor's role in why these characters weren't portrayed well. And again, it's almost like this parasocial thing, right? Like this idea that you don't want to hurt the feelings of the famous actor that was acting in this thing by saying that they were bad in it, especially if it's like the one role that they're really known for. But I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, it's like there's nothing wrong with being bad in a movie. That's fine. I would probably be bad in a movie. But you would probably be bad in a movie. Almost everybody would be bad in a movie probably, because it's just not everybody's skill set. It's not something that everybody's talented at or going to be gifted at. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's a popular but untrue claim right now that that Ginny stunk in the movies because the writers just ruined her, and Ron stunk in the movies because the writers ruined him. And I think the truth lies between the acting wasn't good and the writers made mistakes, because I think both of the things fed into each other. With Ron and Rupert Grint, I largely think it's the same thing, or a similar problem. I will say I do think Rupert Grint is a stronger actor than Bonnie Wright. I think that just by having to do more acting, he became better at it. And I think the writers started to write the character more for him as the story progressed as well. But Rupert just has a limited range for acting. Like, he doesn't have that basic believability problem that Bonnie Wright has. And I think it's just a mismatch of personality for Rupert and this character. He is just a more reserved guy. I don't think he has the range to hit some of the emotional peaks that the character Ron would have required if they had done it strictly based on the books. Like, another example of a scene that people criticize the writers for is there's that scene where I think it's the Deathly Hallows Part 1 in the movies, but it's in the Deathly Hallows book. They're at the Malfoy mansion. They're in the basement and Hermione's upstairs being tortured. And in the books, it's this big thing that Ron is like apoplectic. Like, he's screaming and he's punching the door and he is ripping his throat, just saying that he's gonna kill them if they touch her. And people criticize the writers for not having written that into the movie and instead doing it like this. Barely have a reaction. He's like, oh no, she's being tortured. What do we do? it's worse, right? It's much worse. Everybody likes the version in the book better. They criticize the movies for not doing it. But again, I think this is a scenario where it's like, if they had written that scene that way, could Rupert Grint have done it in a way that didn't feel cheesy or didn't come off as awkward or insincere? They wouldn't have any confidence necessarily that he could do something like that. So they choose to do it in this more subdued way, trying to play to his strengths as an actor. The only times we ever see Rupert Grint sort of reaching the screaming whatever place in his acting is played up for comedy. He's scared and it's for comedy usually. And there are times in these movies where I think that Rupert actually excels. I think he is good at the comedy. He takes an angle to the comedy that's different than what the books went for, but he does it well. In the books, Ron's a bit more witty and jokey, but in the movies, it's more Ron is kind of the butt of the joke, his over-the-top reactions. And I think for that style of comedy, he does a really good job at it multiple times throughout the series. I guess I just am pointing out that I think the writers also understood that these were his strengths, and so they played to those strengths. And the difference in how the character looks from the movies to the books likely has to do with the fact that they're playing to his strengths. Not just that they dislike the character or they're making mistakes or that they're bad writers, which sometimes is what it feels like everybody is saying. But yeah, at the end of the day, I guess I am just saying that the acting was bad. So I don't mean it to be, but I don't want to be too negative in general. I am a big fan of this whole movie franchise and all these things and the fan content and the books. And I am one of those people who's like somewhat excited for the HBO series, because if I had the book series right now and somebody said you could make movies or you could make a TV show, I'd be like, you make a TV show out of it. There's a part of me that likes the idea of it because of that. Like, I just like to imagine all of the book's depth being portrayed just as well as the movies technically. But you know, reality's gonna get in the way of that. There's gonna be a whole bunch of other problems. They're gonna hire child actors that grow up to be terrible actors. They're gonna have controversies and all that stuff's gonna happen because that's just how these things go. But yeah, I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents and kind of defend the writers. That's how it's, see, this isn't me criticizing the actors, it's actually defending the writers, because everybody just lays it at the feet of the writers. They say the writers ruined Jenny, the writers ruined Ron, and I think you could argue it was the casting directors who ruined those characters, but I don't fully blame the cast. I think they could have tried to stretch some of the things that Rupert was doing, or Bonnie. They could have tried to pull out more performances out of them to be more like the book characters, but I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know how hard that would have been. I don't know if that was doable. But yeah, those are my hot takes about the series that everyone fixates on obsessively until the end of time. I know how much people love this series. This is just like one specific thing that I've always thought. And when I hear it all around the internet, YouTube, whatever fandom, it just gets to my head because I'm like, there's this thing that's people blame the writers, and I just don't think that's entirely fair. But yeah, if I offended you, that's weird. Like, honestly, like, that's kind of crazy. That's weird. They're not your friends. Unless your name is Daniel Grint and you're his brother or something. If that's the case, hey, sorry, I just didn't like your brother in the thing. You really shouldn't be offended still. But go ahead and leave an angry comment no matter what, because comments are good. And actually, like, you know, if you just disagree, just think I'm wrong and you want to defend the performances, like, tell me why. I mean, am I crazy? I really do think that these acting performances were just weak.
Take my hand.
Try to argue to me that that's good acting. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment if you agree, disagree. If you want to tell me that I look like Harry Potter or Gary Potter or Jerry Potter, feel free to do so down below. I probably won't make another video for like 10 years, so you can subscribe. But anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks for watching. See ya.